The screenshot loaded on my phone at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and there it was. My eviction notice, photographed and posted to Facebook with the caption, "Some people never learn to live within their means. Pray for my sister." If you have ever been publicly humiliated by family, please hit subscribe and tell me where you are watching from. My name is Claire. I am 32 years old, and I work as a commercial real estate investor. That Tuesday morning, I was sitting in my lawyer's office finalizing the purchase of a 4-unit building in the neighborhood where I grew up. The building came with tenants, all on month-to-month leases. One of those tenants was my older sister, Jessica. She had no idea. The eviction notice she posted was real. It came from my old apartment, the studio I had been renting for 6 years while I saved and invested every spare dollar. I had given my landlord notice that I was moving out, but there had been a clerical mix-up. The property management company sent an eviction filing instead of a standard lease termination. I had cleared it up in one phone call. It meant nothing, but Jessica did not ask me about it. She saw the paper on my kitchen counter when she stopped by unannounced 2 days earlier, snapped a photo, and turned my life into a morality play for her 1,100 Facebook friends. The post already had 63 reactions and 22 comments. This was not new. Jessica had spent our entire adult lives keeping score, and in her version of the story, I was always losing. When I was 24 and she was 27, I asked to borrow her car for a job interview. She said no, because I had not paid her back for a birthday dinner she insisted on treating me to 2 years earlier. I had never known she expected repayment. She brought it up in front of our parents at Christmas. I remember standing in their living room holding a plate of cookies while she said, "Claire has a real problem with accountability." Our mom looked at me with this tired disappointment, and our dad just turned the television volume up. When I was 28, I started my own investment consulting business. It was slow at first. I worked nights as a bartender to cover expenses. Jessica told everyone I was a bartender who played around with stocks. At a family cookout that July, she introduced me to her boss by saying, "This is my little sister. She is figuring things out." Her boss asked what I did, and before I could answer, Jessica said, "A little bit of everything. She has not really found her lane yet." I had just closed my first deal the week before. I had made $16,000 in consulting fees. I said nothing because Jessica was standing there smiling, and our aunt was watching, and I did not want to make it a thing. The third time I should have seen it coming was 8 months before the Facebook post. I had dinner with Jessica and her fiancé Derek. I paid for the meal because it was her birthday. The bill came to $147. I handed the server my card and Jessica looked at Derek and said, "Claire always acts like she has money to burn." Derek laughed. I did not. She did not know that 2 months earlier, I had sold my stake in a small mixed-use property for $83,000 in profit. She did not know that I had been building a portfolio quietly for 4 years. She knew I worked in real estate, but she assumed I was barely scraping by because I still lived in a studio and drove a 10-year-old sedan. I let her assume. So when I saw that Facebook post on Tuesday morning, I sat very still. My attorney, a woman named Ramona, who had worked with me on 3 acquisitions, looked up from the contract and asked if I was all right. I turned my phone around and showed her. Ramona read it, then looked at me. She said, "Is that your sister?" I nodded. She scrolled down and read some of the comments aloud. "Oh, honey, some people just cannot manage money. Sending prayers. This is so sad. Has she tried a budget planner? Claire? I'm so sorry. Do you need help finding resources?" Ramona set my phone down. She said, "Does she know you are about to become her landlord?" I said, "Not yet." Ramona smiled, but it was not a warm smile. She said, "When do you want to tell her?" I said, "After we close." We signed the papers at 11:15 a.m. The purchase price was $412,000. I put down 30% and financed the rest. The building had 4 units. Jessica rented Unit 3, a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor, for $1,200 a month. The previous owner had not raised her rent in 3 years because she paid on time and never complained. I had no intention of evicting her, but I did have every intention of making sure she understood exactly who she had tried to humiliate. I drove to my best friend Lena's house that afternoon. Lena is a paralegal and the only person who knew the full scope of my finances. I had been telling her about my deals for years because I needed someone to celebrate with, and my family had never been that place. I showed her the post. Lena said a word I will not repeat. Then she said, "Claire, you have to shut this down." I said, "I am not engaging on Facebook." Lena said, "I am not talking about Facebook. I am talking about your whole family. They have let her do this to you since you were kids, and you have let them let her." That landed. She said, "You bought her building. You are not the mess she is pretending you are. You need to stop protecting her from the truth." I sat there on her couch and I felt something shift. For years I had told myself that staying quiet was taking the high road. But really, I had been taking the no road. I had been letting Jessica craft a narrative that made her feel superior while I worked twice as hard to prove nothing to no one. Lena said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I am going to be a very professional landlord." She grinned. She said, "Does that plan have a name?" I thought for a second. I said, "Operation New Management." Lena pulled out her laptop. She said, "Let me see the lease agreement." We spent 2 hours going through everything. The previous landlord had sold the building because he was retiring and moving to Arizona. He had been old school, accepting checks by mail and barely keeping records. I was not going to run it that way. I had already hired a property management company called Steadfast Properties to handle day-to-day operations, but I retained all owner decision-making authority. Steadfast sent introduction letters to all 4 tenants on Wednesday, June 7th. The letter explained that ownership had transferred, rent payment instructions were changing to an online portal, and they should expect a courtesy inspection within 30 days to document the condition of each unit. It was completely standard. Jessica called me at 6:32 p.m. That same day, she said, "Did you see that my building got sold?" I said, "Oh, really?" She said, "Yeah, some new landlord. They are probably going to raise the rent." I am so stressed, Claire. You do not understand how hard it is to find affordable housing right now. I could have told her right then. Instead, I said, "I am sure it will be fine." She said, "Easy for you to say. You have never had to worry about stability." I almost laughed. I said, "Jessica, I have been renting the same studio for 6 years. She said, "Yeah, and look where that got you." I did not take the bait. I said, "I have to go." She said, "Wait, did you take down that eviction post? People are asking me about you." I said, "You could take it down." She said, "I just want to make sure you are okay. It is not like I am trying to embarrass you." I said, "Then take it down." She sighed like I was being difficult. She said, "Fine. I will edit it." She did not take it down. She edited the caption to read, "Update. Claire says she is handling it. Still praying." Lena texted me a screenshot 10 minutes later with just a single word, "Unbelievable." On Thursday, June 15th, Steadfast scheduled the inspection of Unit 3 for 4 p.m. on Friday, June 23rd. They sent Jessica a courtesy email with 72 hours notice as required by state law. I decided I would attend that inspection personally. I did not tell Jessica I was coming. I also did not respond to any of the family texts. My mom had sent me a message on Wednesday night saying, "Honey, Jessica told me about your situation. Do you need help? Your father and I can loan you something if you are in trouble." I wanted to scream. Instead, I wrote back, "I am completely fine. There was a paperwork error. It is resolved." She replied, "Jessica is just worried about you." I left it on read. My cousin Amber called on Thursday. She said, "I saw the post. Are you really getting evicted?" I said, "No." She said, "Then what is Jessica talking about?" I said, "You will have to ask her." Amber paused. She said, "She has always done this." I said, "Done what?" Amber said, "Made you sound like a disaster so she can sound like she has it together." When we were teenagers, she told everyone you failed out of community college. You did not even go to community college. You went straight to state and graduated with honors. I had forgotten about that. Amber said, I am just saying, maybe it is time to stop letting her get away with it. I thought about that all day Friday. At 3:55 p.m. on June 23rd, I pulled up outside the building I now owned. It was a brick walk-up with decent bones, a shared front entrance, and 4 mailboxes in the vestibule. I had been inside once before, 2 years ago, when Jessica threw a housewarming party. I brought wine. She made a joke about me trying to look classy. The property manager, a guy named Kyle from Steadfast, was waiting outside. He was maybe 40, very organized, carried a tablet and a clipboard. He said, You must be Ms. Brennan. I said, Call me Claire. He said, Unit 3 is ready? Tenant should be home. She requested to be present for the walkthrough. I said, Perfect. We walked up to the second floor. Kyle knocked on the door marked with a brass number 3. Jessica opened it. She looked at Kyle, then at me. She said, Claire, what are you doing here? I smiled. I said, I own the building. Her face went blank. Kyle, who had no idea about the family drama, said, Ms. Brennan is the new owner. I am Kyle from Steadfast Properties. We are here for the routine inspection. Jessica looked at me. She said, You own this building? I said, as of June 6th. She did not move. Kyle stepped inside and started taking photos of the living room. I followed. Jessica just stood there by the door, staring. I walked slowly through her apartment. It was tidy. The walls were painted a soft gray. She had framed art above the couch and a small kitchen table by the window. Kyle made notes on his tablet. I stayed quiet. After a few minutes, Jessica found her voice. She said, Why did not you tell me? I said, You did not ask. You just assumed I was a mess and posted about it online. She said, That was different. I said, How? She did not answer. Kyle finished the inspection. He said, Everything looks great, Ms. Monroe. No issues noted. You will receive a copy of this report by email. Jessica said, So what now? Are you going to evict me? I said, Why would I evict a tenant who pays on time and keeps the place clean? She said, Then what is this? I said, This is me being a landlord. Your rent is due on the 1st of every month through the online portal. If you have maintenance requests, you submit them to Steadfast. If you want to break your lease, you give 30 days notice in writing. She said, Claire, come on. I said, Come on what? She said, This is weird. I said, What is weird is you posting my personal business on Facebook to make yourself look better. Kyle looked uncomfortable. He said, I will wait outside. He left. Jessica crossed her arms. She said, I was worried about you. I said, No, you were not. You were performing. She said, That is not fair. I said, You have spent years making me sound like I am failing so you can sound like you are winning. I stayed quiet because I did not want to fight. But I am done staying quiet. She said, So you bought my building to what, humiliate me? I said, I bought this building because it was a good investment. I did not know you lived here until after I made the offer. The previous landlord did not share tenant names until closing. That was true. I had seen the rent roll with initials only. When I got the full lease copies, I recognized her address. Jessica sat down on her couch. She said, This is insane. I said, The post is still up. She looked at me. I said, You edited it, but you did not take it down. I want it deleted by end of business today. She said, Or what? I said, Or nothing. I am not going to retaliate. I am just telling you that if you want any kind of relationship with me going forward, you start by telling the truth. She stared at her phone. I said, I will let you think about it. I walked out. Kyle was standing in the hallway, looking at his tablet and pretending he had not heard anything. We walked downstairs together in silence. When we got outside, he said, For what it is worth, you handled that well. I said, Thanks. He said, I have seen family landlord situations go very badly. If you want my advice, keep everything documented and professional. Do not give her any room to say you treated her differently. I said, That is the plan. By 7 p.m., the Facebook post was gone. Jessica did not call me. She sent a text that said, "Fine. It is deleted. Are you happy now?" I wrote back, "I am not looking for happiness from you. I am looking for respect." She did not reply. On June 30th, Jessica's rent came through the portal on time. $1,200. I saw the payment confirmation in my owner dashboard. Steadfast sent me a report showing all 4 units current. My mom called me on July 2nd. She said, "Jessica told me you bought her building." I said I did. She said, "Why did not you tell us you were doing so well?" I said I tried. "You did not listen." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Jessica feels very embarrassed." I said she should. My mom said, "Claire, she is your sister." I said, "And I am hers." That did not stop her from trying to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. My mom sighed. She said, "Can you please just talk to her? She is having a hard time." I said, "She can call me when she is ready to apologize for real." Not for getting caught. For what she did. I hung up. 2 weeks later, on July 16th, my dad called. That was unusual. He was not a phone person. He said, "Your mother is upset." I said, "I know." He said, "Jessica is upset." I said, "Also aware." He said, "What do you want here, Claire?" I said, "I want the same thing I have always wanted. To be treated like I matter." He was quiet. Then he said, "You know your sister has always been insecure." I said, "That is not my job to manage." He said, "No, I guess it is not." That might have been the most honest conversation I ever had with my father. On August 1st, Jessica's rent posted again. On time, $1,200. I did not hear from her until August 19th. She sent a text that said, "Can we talk?" I called her. She answered and said, "I am sorry." I waited. She said, "I am sorry I posted that. I am sorry I have made you feel small. I did not realize I was doing it." I said, "You did realize. You just did not think it mattered." She was quiet. Then she said, "You are right." That surprised me. She said, "I have always been jealous of you. You are smarter than me. You work harder. You do not care what people think, and I care way too much. So I made you sound like a mess because it made me feel better." I said, "That is honest." She said, "I do not know if we can fix this." I said, "I do not know either. But if we are going to try, it starts with you stopping the commentary. My life is not your content." She said, "Okay." I said, "And if you have a problem with me, you say it to me. Not to Mom, not on Facebook, to me." She said, "Okay." I said, "I am not going to raise your rent this year, but I am also not going to give you special treatment. You are a tenant. I am the owner. If that is too weird, I will let you out of your lease with no penalty." She said, "I do not want to move." I said, "Then we keep it professional." She said, "Professional?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Go ahead." She said, "How much are you worth?" I laughed. I said, "That is exactly the kind of question I am not going to answer." She said, "Fair." We hung up. On September 9th, Jessica posted a photo on Facebook. It was a picture of the two of us from when we were kids, maybe 7 and 10, standing in front of our grandmother's house. The caption said, "Throwback to simpler times. Love you, sis." Lena texted me the screenshot and said, "Progress?" I wrote back, "Maybe." On December 1st, all 4 units paid rent on time again. My building was generating $4,900 a month in gross rent. After mortgage, property management, taxes, insurance, and maintenance reserve, I was clearing about $900 a month in cash flow. But the real value was in appreciation and equity paydown. In 6 months, the building had increased in estimated value by $11,000. I was doing fine. Better than fine. On December 23rd, Jessica invited me to her apartment for coffee. I almost said no. But I was curious. I went. She opened the door and said, "Come in." Her place looked the same. She had added some Christmas lights around the window. She poured 2 mugs of coffee and sat across from me at the little kitchen table. She said, "I have been in therapy." I said, "Good." She said, "My therapist asked me when I started comparing myself to you. I think I was 12. You won the science fair. Mom hung your ribbon on the fridge. I got so mad I hid it in the trash. I said, I remember that ribbon disappearing. She nodded. She said, I have been doing that ever since, hiding your wins, so I do not have to feel less than. I said, I never thought I was better than you. She said, I know. That made it worse. We sat there for a minute. She said, I am not asking you to forget it. I just want you to know I am working on it. I said, thank you. She said, are you going to sell the building? I said, not anytime soon. Why? She said, because I like living here. And knowing you own it feels safer than some random landlord. I said, even after everything? She said, yeah, even after. I sipped my coffee. It was too sweet, but I did not say anything. On January 11th of the following year, I got an offer on a second building. 6 units. I closed on March 3rd. Jessica sent me a congratulations text with a champagne emoji. It was small, but it was something. I kept the first building. Unit 3 stayed occupied. Rent came in on the 1st of every month. I saw Jessica at family dinners, and we were polite. Sometimes we were even warm. We were not best friends. We might never be. But we were no longer enemies. I still have the key to that building on my key ring. It sits next to the key for my new condo and the key to the second property. Every time I see it, I remember what it felt like to sit in Ramona's office and realize I had the power to answer cruelty with fairness. I did not evict Jessica. I did not raise her rent out of spite. I did what I said I would do. I was professional. That mattered more than any revenge ever could. If someone in your family has used your hard times as a stage for their own ego, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. Hit subscribe if you believe respect is not optional, even with family. And share this if you have ever had to set a boundary with someone who thought you did not have the right.